when times are tough, that's the time to be a really good leader. It's not like just, hey, why aren't you doing more? It's, hey guys, let's keep our heads up. Tough month, keep at it. We're doing a lot of great things. Even when I'm on all our financial reviews with all our GMs. So again, can't speak to a difference. I know Ken's reputation is really good in the industry, and he created a great business and brand. It sounds similar to me. But I've learned along the way, and people change, but we need to be great leaders, not just managers, and that's cliche, but the reality is we have to have great leadership in these companies.
Hey, what's up, To The Point listeners? It's your boy, Cristiano, the host of To The Point Home Services Podcast, and we are live at ACCA in the Big Easy. And the Big Easy was a little tough on me last night, so I'm going to do my best to get through this podcast. Thankfully, I've got two great guys on the podcast with me, and this one here is going to be a banger. It's going to be one for the books, I'm hoping. Probably two of the best dressed guys here at ACCA. We have Mr. Frank DiMarco from Service Champions, and also my friend Ken Goodrich, Goettl, both sitting looking at me,
shaking,
wondering what's going to happen.
Shaking our heads.
Next. Wondering how I'm going to do this time around. Both previous guests on the podcast, great guys, have huge businesses, lots of, obviously lots of clout in the industry. This is going to be good. These are two West Coast Titans. And I'm excited to get through some of these questions. And this first one is a doozy. Right out of the gate, I just want to get after it. So everyone's going to play nice. And I thought, well, what better way to start this thing off by asking, actually, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Ken. Ken, Mr. Goodrich, what? You see Frank sitting across from you, right? He's at Service Champions and, reputable business, big company. What does Frank or Service Champions do better than you?
Good question. Well, let me qualify this, start with this one statement. I'm obviously much cuter than Frank. So let's just get that out there. I'm much cuter. So no matter what I say after this, I still have that going for me.
So you started off with the opposite of what I asked you. Okay, here we go. So he's better looking. There we go.
All right. Would you ask the question?
I agree.
Would you ask the question one more time?
God. See, you already derailed yourself. What does Frank or what does Service Champions do better than you?
Well, I think that Service Champions, they do a lot of things better than what we do. But I think that one of the key items is they have been dedicated to the service agreement or club membership model from day one. When Leland Smith founded the company, that's all he could see. He understood that in Southern California, you don't have the benefit of weather, right? It's not a weather-dependent market, even though that market is the largest HVAC market in the country, all of LA, Southern California. It's still, you don't get a lot of weather assist. We're in Las Vegas where, it's hot. Phoenix, Tucson. So they dedicated themselves to the service agreement model, stick to it. It is the core of their business as I see it. I'm looking from the outside as I see it, and they do it better than anyone else in the industry as far as I know.
That's very thoughtful. Have you ever heard him be so nice?
Ken's always nice when I'm around. I don't know who he's mean to, but when I see him, he's always nice. It's nice to me. He's
a sweetheart. Okay, Frank, hey, now it's your turn to look gazingly into Ken's eyes and tell him what he does better than you. Besides
we got that part.
Okay.
We sorted that one early.
Okay.
Look, I think, one of the things we try to do is I think it's processes and continuing to make businesses, Goettl businesses, or that's impressive to me. That's hard to do. Just any change, any wrinkle in any business, when we go into them, that's difficult. To be steadfast in, I'm going to create this brand, that there has to be processes behind that. I don't know much about it, but I know that every business he buys goes under that brand and they're successful. And so I would say, the ability to do that consistently is certainly something. It's a different way we go about it. We want to keep a local brand, but clearly his business is very valuable, and I think that ability to build under one name, he certainly has set really the bar for everybody else who wants to do it. And with that has to be processes. I mean, as these things scale, you can't just remember it. There has to be a process for converting a business and what you're going to do. So that would be my take on it from what we've watched, at a distance. I have the advantage of, Leland and Ken have been friends for a long, long time. And so I hear it from Leland, and I think it's a very interesting, and he's the only one doing it that I'm aware of. You're the only one that takes businesses and says, I am going to create Goettl and I'm going to move that across the country. And clearly he's doing that well. Again, it's not a path we pick, but the process piece has to be there, else he wouldn't be successful doing it.
Yeah, it's actually a great segue because he says he's trying to Goettlize the nation. But you guys have two completely different strategies, and so I'm curious, which one's the best strategy? And maybe it's subjective. I mean, it is subjective, I guess, based on whatever your plan is. But you have a house of different brands. I mean,
yeah. I don't. It's like when I look at an individual business when we're going to invest. I don't think there's one idea that makes really good money. Leland Smith built a business. Back to Ken's point, like, look, I had luxury. I got some great mentors, Dave Geiger, Leland Smith. I mean, I get to sit across from Leland for the last 5 years, across from the hallway from the guy, and I was with Dave and Mark, for 8 years. I don't know if there's a right answer. I think today, the different sponsors and the private equity groups have what they believe. Ken's obviously done very well, a couple of different times with the Goettl platform. For us, we felt like we want to continue to have the entrepreneurial spirit in a business. And so we have an umbrella where we're going to look at, purchasing and maybe some systems, but that company has to fit with us. And then we're going to leverage a local brand. I would say I can't say we're necessarily different than Ken, but we're going to look for bigger businesses. I know all the other CEOs, or a lot of them at the bigger platforms. So we have less at a much bigger number because we feel like we have expertise to run those bigger companies. We have less, almost 20 companies, but the business is scaling pretty nicely. That's not to say we're right. That's just to say that's the way we go about it. And our partner, our sponsor over there, with Odyssey, they feel like that's a good path for us to be on. And we continue to perform. When you talk to enough bankers and people in the industry, we want to maintain a good profitability. But I couldn't answer that there's one is better than the other one. I think there's a lot of great models out there. Certainly he's got one that's doing very well. Ours is a hybrid of don't touch companies when you get a hold of them, but we don't want to do too much to them. We just want to see if we can enhance them. So I don't know, Ken, your thought, but that's where I'm at is there's a lot of great models. Back to my original point, Leland's belief was like, hey, everything's got to be this way in Service Champions. I'm like, there's some other 25+% net businesses that are doing it differently. And it doesn't mean his was wrong. It just means you got to be open to different ways to do it.
Got it. And you clearly are wanting to Goettlize the nation. Like, why did you pick that path? Like, why? Because you have you still have a few businesses though that are still operating as their original name right now, right? That are on the Goettl brand, but the play is to Goettlize the nation, right? So it is to be one brand.
Right. So we currently have a couple that are still their legacy brand name, but we have plans to, we call them Goettlize them over the first 12 months. And we've been very successful at that with our process. Now, that's not to say if I went into a market and we found a meaningful sized business that had years of experience and a meaningful brand and a meaningful management team and, large volume, I probably wouldn't touch that and maybe somehow just kind of put our name alongside a Goettl company, something like that. And, we'll sort that out later. I wouldn't touch that. But let me back up. Let me say this. The reason why I started this strategy is because Goettl Air Conditioning was founded in 1939, and the Goettl brothers invented the residential air conditioner. They took the Lewis Carrier's industrial design, they applied it to a small box, and made a residential air conditioner. They used to manufacture evaporative coolers, mass produce them. And so they made a package unit that would attach to where the old cooler went. So over the course of time, my dad got in the business and he became a Goettl dealer. And then I was 10 years old holding the flashlight for him. And every night and weekend and all summer long, I worked alongside of my dad fixing air conditioners, fixing Goettl air conditioners. And so Goettl was really part of my family's heritage. When my dad passed away at a pretty young age, I bought the business from my mom. And Goettl was the only company that would give me credit. Probably because I was 25 and I had a mullet.
Didn't you fire your mom?
Yeah, I had to fire my mom once. Keep bringing that up. So yes, I did fire my mom. But I kept paying her. She's the only person I've ever fired and continue to pay her for 30 years.
That was the opposite of my father. Got fired, still had to come in and work and didn't get paid.
So anyway, so Goettl, really meant a lot to me. And when I had an opportunity to buy it, it was really on its last leg and it was ready to shut the doors. And so to rally cry my team around, we're going to take this brand, we're going to take this legacy brand and take it back to the place that it deserves, a nationwide brand, Goettlize the nation, because they invented it. So that was my cry for my team to build the culture about our why and what are we doing here, right? So I started there. And let me give you another backstory. 1997, Leland and I both sold some companies to ARS. And so we worked together back then, and we saw lots of mistakes, and that was one of the original roll-up times of our industry. A lot of mistakes. They'd go in immediately and just change the brand name without integration, and that wrecked companies. They left them out too long and took out the management team. That broke companies. Everything that we learned there was pretty much what not to do in that first era of ARS. I've been involved in ARS a couple more times, and they certainly have got more experienced management teams and really pulled the business together. It's a whole different place and a very impressive business today. But back then, no one really knew what they were doing. So I kind of had that, influence of, I want to build. I don't want to go down that route, have all these different brands and problems and this and that. And I guess the third thing is that I've always had this dream that I want to build a company like Discount Tire. So Discount Tire, guy starts a tire store, creates a great culture. Everyone that works in the company starts airing up tires first. They work their way up, promotion from within, builds 4,000 stores, $4 billion company, privately held, a nationwide brand. And that was my vision and how I wanted to really pull this Goettl thing together. I know it's not popular, certainly not the popular move today. I can't move as fast. I'm not, can't put the revenue numbers up like these other guys are doing. But I think I'm building a much stronger foundation and a stronger culture where, any of my managers can go to any branch, run it the same way, and, we'll have some more longevity to the thing. That's what I see.
Got it. So whenever I get involved with any private equity whatsoever, and I'm having to work with the specific brand in a market, it always, I'll give a good example. Any Hour is a customer of ours, right? So Any Hour is obviously a monster brand in Utah. They come into Phoenix, and that brand has no brand equity, right? So it doesn't do us any good in the Arizona market because there's no brand equity. But if you have Will's down in San Antonio, right? You would leverage that brand, because if you came in and just changed it, then you would have no brand equity to run. It would be brutal for a marketing company or a guy like me trying to create business if I had to work with no brand equity. It's difficult. It's like basically a brand new company. Nobody knows.
I will say though that the Will's deal was probably one of our best executed that we've done to Goettlize a company. They were doing 11 million in sales. And we bought the business, and then we started co-marketing, and we started talking on the radio about Will and I being friends, and we're coming together, and we're partnering now, and we're just really informing the market what's going to happen. And if you just tell them, it'll be okay. It's when you surprise them and don't tell them is when the customers get pissed off, right? So we were conditioning the market over time and meld that business together. And as soon as we hit 21, the thing took off, and we 4X that business from its original revenue in 3 years, and still changed it to a Goettl. But just like you said, it's a process. It's a detailed and arduous process, and I can see why you'd want to buy a nice $50 million business that's cash flowing at 20% and leave it alone. That sounds like a real easy plan too.
Both can work, right? Both do work.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to go into just a little segue into some talking about kind of your guys' management styles. I've known both of you guys quite a while. You and I have gotten to do business together a lot of years ago. And so I know both of you pretty well, but you guys have different management styles. What is the difference? Like, do you think, what do you see what's your guys' difference in your management styles?
I probably couldn't answer for Ken's. I know, he's very involved with his businesses, and he's again, creating a brand. Look, one thing I've had to learn how to do when you have 20 locations and hundreds of millions in business, you can't do, one of the things I do is get out of the business. The private equity firm is like, Frank, we know you know how to run these, and you've got a great track record. I can't really say for style because I couldn't say from Ken's perspective, but for me, it's we're going to let people, we're going to elevate people that are really good. We like Ken, we work on who's the next level of management. That is where I spend my time. That and M&A. We have 4 regional vice presidents. We treat them like division presidents that are very seasoned in the industry. They each run, give or take 150 to 200 million each, and they are from the, they know it. They continue to, use that entrepreneurial piece in those businesses. So I'd say the only difference in Ken's last name, about a $50 million business, we don't do nothing. We're not far down the spectrum like he is. What we'll say is, hey, here's some great ideas. You fit on the team. Here's some things that could work. Usually those things that work, bring them 2 or 3 or 4 points on the bottom line. And because they're investors, they like that. I would just say culturally for me is, growing up in the business, again, I can't speak to a difference, but what I would say is, I've said this before, and I'm pretty public with it, that we are not a poke people in the chest, like get it done business. We're going to put our arm around people and say, 1, great job, or 2, if you're not doing what we think you should be doing, why not? And there's ways to do that, but we're very humble. We try to, we keep our heads down. We don't want to talk about it. I talk a little bit about our companies, but I always feel like we have work to do. And that's from Dave Geiger and Leland Smith and probably my father, right? They always think, and Leland will say like, everything's broken all the time. That gets tiring, but he was right. Like the management team is always like, what can we do better? And you got to encourage that. And I'd say the other pivot for me over my career is, when times are tough, that's the time to be a really good leader. It's not like just, hey, why aren't you doing more? It's, hey guys, let's keep our heads up. Tough month, keep at it. We're doing a lot of great things. Even when I'm on all our financial reviews with all our GMs. So again, can't speak to a difference. I know Ken's reputation is really good in the industry, and he created a great business and brand. It sounds similar to me, but I've learned along the way, and people change, but we need to be great leaders, not just managers, and that's cliche, but the reality is we have to have great leadership in these companies to understand everybody's dealing with something in our companies, from the guy unloading the trucks all the way through, GMs and our C-level people. Everyone's dealing with something. Try to understand that a little bit. It's not, we're doing heating and air conditioning, people's chests open on a table working on them, so let's be supportive, and let's see how we can help people. Having said that, we are unapologetic for our expectations. We are going to get where we want to get to. What we believe is people will follow that and chase that because they want to, and they want to work hard versus, why is my phone ringing, on a Sunday at 4 p.m. and Frank wants to know something about a financial. I've been looking at it and how do we do it? But so I can't speak to differences. I've gotten to know Ken a little bit, but I know he's done a great job with his companies, and I would guess to be successful doing this, you have to have similar, outlooks on them.
What do you do different, KG?
Well, from my observation only, I would say that Frank is more of a high caliber servant leader, and I am more of a mad scientist. That's what I would say. Because when I watch him and how he interacts with people, it's very calm and thoughtful and engaging. And sometimes I'm an innovator and I'm always thinking and coming up with the new ideas and such. I have to have somebody like a Frank between me and the team. Now, I will say that over the years I've aged, like fine wine. And I've softened it up a little bit. Back in the early days, it was kind of rough. It'd be a whole different discussion. But now I think I have a very good rapport with my team, and they respect me. And I think they look at me in terms of more of the visionary innovator in the company. I think they probably look at Frank more as the leader of the company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. I'll go back to, I had the luxury of, sitting, and I still see Leland almost daily, but getting to work with, back in 08 through, 14 with Dave and Mark and with Leland, you have to figure out in those roles that you're talking about how to, take the current situation and know that you're still moving this business along, and I've developed probably that piece where I want to understand. And the reality is, Ken, I grew up an owner, but that was it. Once we sold our business to Lennox/Service Experts in the late 90s, I've worked for someone. And so I've had great owners like Ken, like Leland, like Dave, like Mark, and I've had to figure out how to be that in between, because it was their money on the line, it was their vision, and I could understand and interpret it, but I think it's a great, I think you articulated it pretty well there, is the difference.
Yeah, and I actually think that because you were sold to Lennox early on, it forced you to become a better manager and a better leader. Whereas we, Leland and I, for instance, we were just scrappy entrepreneurs trying to keep payroll, right?
Yeah.
So, and we didn't probably develop those skills later. So you probably had a longer runway for that.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely was an educational process, post private ownership and growing up in it.
We were talking, Ken, you and I on the flight over, about you're kind of in like the perfect position that you want to be in at this phase, right? Like you're talking about like, hey, I kind of just get to be the nice guy. I kind of get to go in and be the rah-rah guy. And that's the position. Remember we were talking about that on the flight over? That's the position that you're in now. So he doesn't have to go in and be the hard ass.
Yeah, well, it used to be, when I'd show up at a branch, there was little tents and everyone was head down and it's very serious. Now they're getting out of their desk. Ken, how you doing? They're talking to me and I'm patting them on the back. Yeah, I like that role better. It suits me better.
Probably feels better, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears. We're about 20 or so minutes into this thing. I want to talk about... on the sales side of things, selling techs versus like comfort advisors and that kind of conversation. I'm not sure if you prefer one or the other, Frank or Ken, but what's your guys' thoughts on like the better strategy there? Like, I'll tell you selfishly from a marketing perspective, having selling techs is fantastic because most people want to repair it, not replace it. So it's easier for me to go after a repair lead if I've got a selling tech, typically a good close ratio or whatever. But what's your guys' thoughts on like what's the better strategy there? And is it what are you guys using? Selling tech versus actual comfort advisors or whatever the hell you call them?
Well, I've used it all and all kinds of other stuff in the past, but today, our technicians, go through our process and they identify, what the cost and the strategy is to repair things today, and discuss the options for a lead to where one of our comfort advisors or salespeople will come out and talk to them and close that sale. So our technicians do not complete the sale. Not to say though, the lead set process is a very important piece of this thing, and setting up the call correctly for the comfort advisor to come out. So they're an integral part. So I would say they get it up, they probably get the sale done about 60%, 70% maybe sometimes. And then the closer comes in and he'll go through the options with the customer. That's how we run it.
Got it. Right.
It's a mix, depending on what what we're investing in the brand. We don't make somebody do one or the other, but even in Brea, in Leland's business that he founded at Service Champions in Brea, there's a mix. We have true salespeople, and then we have technicians that sell. And typically what I see companies, for us, I think there's a lot of great ways to do it. Growing up and spending the majority of my career, it's a traditional turn process. What I've learned is that there are very talented technicians that can sell. Whereas in the past, I used to think, geez, could a true salesman, I'll use that term, could they get more out of the sale than the technician could?
Oh, you mean like a bigger ticket?
Full system, more options, et cetera, with more formal sales training. Leland's platform or his business was you could teach those guys those same things. They were really salesmen. They were just wearing a uniform and tearing down the systems, but I think there's I think there's both good ways. I think what most companies struggle with is which one do I do? And that can be tricky because now a salesman's wondering why they didn't get the lead and why it didn't turn. But I think the challenge is that consumers are getting more educated. They look up stuff right while you're in the home, right while they're on the computer. And if you're not savvy and you don't have good training as to why your company's building a good value versus other people, then it just boils down to a price issue. And if you've just come through from a technical side, sometimes without good formal sales training, to Ken's point, that's hard to overcome. But we have models that use them both. The majority of our business is a true turn process. Technician goes, turns a lead, or there's a training visit to help somebody walk through that tune-up and talk to the customer.
And I think one of the challenges with selling techs that Service Champions overcome is when you're smaller and you don't have the resources, you're really not on top of every single call to really track their closing rate, right? And really hold them accountable. And I know that Leland had perfected that system to the point, as I understand, I hope I'm not giving out any secrets here. You can erase it if we do, but that
not erasing anything.
if
you're either confirm or deny what he's about to say.
My understanding is if your guys aren't hitting certain metrics, they don't get a sales book, right? If they're not, playing the game correctly, if they're not reporting their sales and their no sales, if they're not selling their club memberships, if they're not doing everything down the line, they don't get a sales book, gets taken away, right? And so my understanding is he had a very high fidelity on the metrics as it relates to a selling tech, and he perfected that system. Now, I didn't have that, so I punted and went to my direction, and we've figured that one out.
Correct. It was a very unique program. Leland says this phrase, Dave Geiger says it differently. Leland says it's easy to do it. It's just easier not to do it. Dave would say it's simple, just not easy, but he's exactly right. You move your way through our technician process, and then you have to earn the right to be able to sell for us. But that's not every company we have, but we like that. We like that concept because if you fall off on any one metric, we'd say, hey, we need to pull you back to, AAA ball to have you go back through it again because you're burning leads for us. You're burning opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it really holds those selling techs accountable to continually sharpen their saw, to continually play the game, execute the process, the game plan every single time, not just willy-nilly, hey, I'm going to go sell a couple jobs today, make myself a couple grand today and go home.
Yep.
It's over at Service Champions, it's a career, not a flippant job,
Yep, it's well said.
Got it. Well, we are going to, tomorrow morning, we are on a panel together, all of us, and we're talking.
We are?
Yeah, I hope I feel a little better
just got
tomorrow
the
morning
invite.
than I felt this morning. But, we're on a panel tomorrow, guys, just so you remember. That is why we're here. But about this potential of a down economy, recession, or whatever that is coming. But I think we learned a few things the last few years, and that's how incredibly important having a strong brand really is, and that certainly is helpful. But are you guys really worried about this potential market correction? Like, are you really concerned about any of that? Is it?
I think it's a.
Is it a thing?
Spent my life. We've seen a couple of them. Certainly, Ken's.
Oh, wait.
I can remember even back to '89 and '90. Early '90s, growing up doing this. I remember that.
Aged yourself.
I'm the only 48-year-old with 40 years of HVAC experience. So, look, we view it as an opportunity. Do I think there's zero thought about it? No, we're always going to gauge what, people are doing in the homes. But I would say what we know, and I'd be interested to hear Ken's answer, but I think if you run really good businesses or you believe that you're doing the right things for customers, et cetera, that it's an opportunity to take market share. Yeah. Now, the sales process is going to get tougher. People are going to shop, et cetera. But typically what happens, it's I don't know how many billions anymore. It's $60 or $70 billion, opportunity in our industry. And when you look at the private equity backed firms, we're, call it 15 billion of it. There's this massive, smaller shop, good businesses that are there that chose to stay private. Typically, one of the first things you see them do, though, is because their house or their name is on the line, they start to cut things. They start to cut marketing. They start to cut, they watch hours. And, you get it. Like, I defend that thought process because it's, it's very unnerving to spend money when things are going the opposite way. We are that way. We're gonna, we've beefed up. We went into our budgets in 2023 with more marketing funds available, and because we felt like if there's a downturn, we're gonna mash the gas. We think we'll take share, the businesses will grow. So we view it as an opportunity, not because we're good and they're not. It's just a matter of the economics in, what we have available for capital and things behind us. I'm not really worried about it. I think if the media would just stop saying there's going to be, like everybody would just spend money and it'd be okay, or like they've been doing. I mean, you come here and you go out to dinner, especially, Southern California, like you can't move, like you can't get in a reservation. So I don't know. I mean, granted you'd say, well, that's Southern California. We own businesses all over the country and we don't have that situation. So I'm cognizant of it. I'm just not caught up in the fact that, I'll quote, Mark Aiken said, like, we're just not going to play that game. We have to have a different mindset. But there's opportunity in it. But, we're aware of it. I don't think it's the impact that, people, put this dark cloud over that here's what's going to happen.
Right. Well, based on Bourbon Street last night, there's no recession.
Or this afternoon when I came over here, like the streets are jammed. So, Ken, what do you think?
Well, so 2008, 9, and 10, the Great Recession, I was doing a project with ARS, and I had 7 of their underperforming businesses, total $30 million in revenue. And so I took those 3 businesses and I grew them for the 3 years, 8, 9, and 10. The results were we took it from 30 million to 80 million on the top and 3 million to 14.3 million on the bottom. During 8, 9, and 10, when the whole world was falling apart in the Southwest U.S., in Phoenix, Vegas, the same kind of footprint we play in today, where the housing market really got crushed more than a lot of other places. So we are in a very resilient business. That said, I'll say this. If you're running your business like a business person, which is frugal and based on efficiency, and you're making sure that you're driving towards optimizing results, and not cutting, but leading and optimizing results, you should put 25% to the bottom line. That's the target. And there should be no change in that if we have a slowdown, if you're running your business properly. That's what I say.
25%. Did you hear that?
Now,
we agree.
Yeah. And let me tell you this, to your point, Frank, in 8, 9, and 10, when everybody pulled in their horns, I pushed the throttle forward and we just spent marketing. We just went after them and we took business. There might have not been new business, but we took business that was being unattended to by other companies. And so, same thing, we're all, we got a big war chest right now ready, but right now I'm really working on the efficiency so we don't even have to dig into the war chest. And I'm pretty comfortable we won't have to.
Agreed. I feel the same way. Hopefully I don't think we'll have to.
Well, you guys both kind of said something that I am 100% in agreement with, and that was I started our company in 2008, and we kind of took off because people were like, people who weren't ready to make the jump from, say, Yellow Pages or whatever to internet were starting to look for other paths then, and so they went the website route. So it was a good time to start my business. But then as the pandemic hit, it was, let's double down because people are going to be afraid and pull back, and now you can take a big chunk of share if you just kept going. And that's exactly what happened. It was, I mean, these last few years have been like unprecedented years for the home services space as a whole, but I'm a big believer in you double down when, if somebody's, because you think this is a mindset game, right? This is still a mindset game that we're in, like you're talking about.
Yep.
The media makes it sound worse than it actually really is based on what I see. But that's going to get to some people, and they're going to be more conservative.
For sure.
I will say that this first quarter has probably been the toughest first quarter I can remember across the United States, just in regards to like demand being lower overall. But same thing, foot to the floor, because those people are you still got to, there's still plenty out there to go get. It's just who's gonna go after it and go get it. So I'm going to do one more quick shift, okay, since we're kind of talking about this whole marketing thing. You guys both have great brands, which certainly is helpful in any business, just with conversions, things like that, because you got brand equity, so you have trust. What kind of marketing mix are you guys looking at this year? Because, I mean, you had, like in Southern California, it was a weird-ass first quarter there. There's been so much rain happening there. You can't get the technicians to go to the house. Like, it was a weird year, right?
Yeah.
But the weird start to the year. I don't know. I'm in a few different text message groups with some, a lot of big players too, and everybody's experiencing similar things. But the one thing that is consistent is everyone's still hammering marketing, like hammering it. So, like, what is the? And I'm a fan of that, by the way, especially digital marketing. But you have to do that, right? Like, still got to, like, just because you have a great brand, you can't just rely on that. You still got to like hammer home on the marketing. But what's your guys' like marketing mix? What are the things that you're doing? I know that I see Ken on TV when I wake up, and I even see Duncan on TV when I wake up, and he looked super happy on that commercial. But what is like the marketing mix that you guys are doing right now? Like, are you heavy on one thing now? Are you getting ready? I mean, we're getting ready to go into summer. We finally got some heat, in our markets. But what are you guys doing? What's the mix?
Well, for us, I'm leaning heavy into the brand. I always have been a brand player. And so the best way to get the brand out, a brand message out, is mass media, radio, TV, cable. So we're still heavy into that, and because it costs more per impression than digital, most of our money will head that way. We still are going to we have a very heavy and robust digital strategy that we're deploying right now. We're going back to direct mail. We have, our roots came from direct mail. We used to, play a direct mail game every single week for 52 weeks a year, and just, send it to particular zip codes and different neighborhoods and zones and measuring the performance of that. So we're adding some of that back there, but maybe mainly to support our brand, right? I'm trying to get out there and relate to customers and connect to them on a personal level. And those are the best mediums for that. And then, you're going to pick us up on digital, looking for our name.
Got it. You guys do a big direct mail thing too, right?
Yeah, that was, in most of the markets, that's consistent, and that's not something we drive into the brands. It's just what we find. Again, that was kind of Leland's pitch, was the direct mail. You'd think it fades, but in the demographic we look at, it's still, very, well utilized and the good return. Our mixes, really stay the same. Sounds very similar, to what Ken's doing. There's a digital in bigger markets. You have to, if you're going to be on TV, you have to spend X amount, or else you're just lost. In LA specifically, it's challenging, but we put the Service Champions brand, even though we have multiple brands in those markets. But it's still the same classic, we're going to do direct mail or digital we're working on. Ironically, to his point about brand, we don't have call to action. We don't have call to action advertising. Like, that's just not what we've done. We advertise like we have great technicians and why you want to use us, but we don't say like, hey, find your lowest price. Every system $25.90. We don't do that stuff. We're going to say, hey, why we're the best to deal with. Recognize our individual brands, but again, I think it's direct mail, digital. There's branding and all of that. But we've been consistent even with the headwind in the first quarter, and I think back to Ken made a point earlier just to say that the marketing is only so effective. You can throw anything you want into the market when it's perfect. Or when it's raining and that's a headwind, like you could tell them it's free. I mean, people are just like, I don't care, don't come to my house.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, right. So it's the execution and the discipline in the business with efficiency and metrics, and that to me, he was making the point about what's going on with marketing. But for us, that's if we do that, and we do that consistently, like we do 12 months out of the year, we'll work our way through even the toughest periods. And so our first quarter was. I would say very solid. I always have high expectations. I'm, again, unapologetic for those, but we have high expectations, and we think we fared, pretty well relative to talking to some of the other people. But again, I'll go back to Ken's point about Leland. We never relied on weather. We'd love to have a tailwind, but you
never had weather.
Yeah, so there was never weather to start. So when you're doing a massive tune-up and you're doing that, and we do it on all the, the brands and a lot of agreements, it certainly helps.
What's interesting? When I first got in business, the old guys looked down on anyone who advertised, because the old guys operated like word of mouth is the best form of advertising. If you have to advertise, you're not doing good, right? Yeah. They would look down on you for advertising. And how I got in the advertising game is the Yellow Page girl came over, and she was very beautiful, and I said, well, let's quit talking about this Yellow Page thing, and why don't we just go on a date? And she said, if you buy a full page ad, I'll go on a date with you. And I didn't even know what a full page ad or how much it costs. They said, fine, I'll do a full page ad. And I signed it. I didn't even look at the cost. And we went out, right? Well, 6 months later,
this is not recommended.
6 months. I love we're recording it.
Yeah. 6 months later, the bill comes. It was $6,480. I'm like, what? I'm just starting out, but I couldn't cancel it. So the ad came out, and my phone started ringing off the hook, and I had to hire a bunch of technicians, and we immediately soared to the top of contractors in Las Vegas in the first 18 months from that full page ad. And that's what kind of got me hooked on marketing.
Where is she today? She's like a good salesperson.
Sounds like I need to catch up with Ken for a drink and hear the rest of that story.
Oh, hi, Wendy.
This is way before Wendy.
I figured as much. Just for some reference, Wendy Goodrich is sitting right behind Ken. Great story. Good job. Full page ad. Some of these guys have no idea what the hell that even is. People listening.
Thank God.
Well, it's the point. It's the point. What the point is that, here's what everyone needs to understand in the contract or home service business today. The game's changed, right? When I started, if you advertised, you were a creep. Today, you got to have a full repertoire of mediums to advertise in, drilling in the metrics every single day, and it has to be a key component of the business, or you will not be successful. Now that most of the competition is armed with big war chests, I'd hate to be somebody that has missed this point, because you won't make it.
It seems weird that it would be looked down upon to advertise your business.
I don't know. That's the way it was. Did you experience something like that?
Growing up, I mean, I laughed when you said it, but the reality also was, though, Ken, there was no, what's the biggest business you remember? When I was young, the biggest business was probably the Isaac brothers over in New York. I lived in Ohio, and the rumor was they were like $20 million. That might as well have been $200 million, back in. And so today, I think, post, the late 90s, where people got together and said, hey, we could do this better, track better. And then I grew up with people knew my dad, they knew my grandfather. And so that's how we did business. And, I don't recall it being looked on, but my dad's favorite thing was to negotiate with the Yellow Page people, because it was just like a 15 round fight over the price. And, here we are today, and it's People don't even know what it is. People don't know what it is.
Triple truck.
But yeah, I remember that exactly.
Double truck, triple truck. That's where I started in marketing, was in Yellow Pages, just as it was, early 2000s.
In Las Vegas, here's a fun fact. In Las Vegas, there's two phone books published a year, not just one, because the majority of revenue they get off is the escort services, right? And so, but the escort services would get shut down so fast that they'd have to have another book in 6 months, and they get paid again.
That is not
$2
the
a
strategy
country.
behind
I've
it.
obviously not been out with Ken for enough drinks because the stories he has. Now I'm really intrigued. Like, I got to get together and hear more of this stuff.
I don't think that the Yellow Page publisher built the strategy around the escort business.
100%. They built it around that in Las Vegas. Go call one of your Yellow Page people.
No, I call bullshit, but whatever. Okay, there could be some truth to that maybe in Las Vegas, but I think it's a stretch.
When you had like 60 double trucks.
Double trucks. That, by the way, for our listeners, that's a 2-page ad. Double truck. And they were expensive back in the day. Expensive for those. All right, we're about 45 minutes in this thing too. I'm going to ask one last question for you guys, and then we'll figure out who we can recommendations from you guys on who we should get on here next to have a little battle. But a lot of technology in the space right now, and I'm loving.
Leland, we should have Ishmael and Victor. Ishmael and Victor. That's my vote. All right, go ahead.
Okay. All right. There it is. Do you second the motion?
I mean, Ken's been really good recommendations and stories. Like, for sure. Second that.
Is this a live and in person one? I mean, I'll make it happen. Listen, I'm happy to make that work. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make that one happen. Okay.
It's the first rhino cage match.
Yeah, I might have to actually do that one virtual. Now think about it. We may need to keep that one virtual. All right, last question. I want to get to this technology piece of it because there's a lot of cool technology in the space right now too, and I love having the conversations about all the technology in the space. And it keeps getting more and more advanced, right? Like even with this in my world, like with the Chat GPT shit that's coming out and or that's here. And but what kind of new technology you guys flirting with? Like, is there something that you guys you've implemented recently that's making the business more efficient? Like, I mean, I'm not talking like the CRMs. I'm not talking about that. Like, but is there any other technology that you guys are using? I know I've had conversations with Ken about some different stuff, and there's just a lot of neat things out there, but there's also a lot of shiny objects. What are you guys doing to leverage technology?
The big conversation we have is exactly to your point, is trying to sort through, what's legitimate and what, is a paper tiger. So
a paper tiger?
Yeah, it's not a real one. You can smash them.
Got it. I didn't get the reference, but
that's right. I think when I look down the road at the businesses, our first goals, we want to have multiple trades in the business, right? Because that we can help still scale them. But at the end of the day, for me on HVAC, it's predictive information. Yeah. And so we spent a fair amount of time just looking at, and we're not the only ones because it's out there. And I've seen a couple versions of it. But somewhere, right, we're going to all be faced with the fact that right now we wait for the phone to ring for the demand call. I'm starting to see a lot more software that can go on systems that can tell us what's coming up. And now we say, Mr. Yano, I noticed, we're seeing some high amp draw. Let us get out there and take a look at it. We haven't tested any of it yet, but it's out there. And I've seen it, over the last few years. But that, to me, is where the industry is going to start to go. That's just my personal opinion. Because you got to predict. Time is the most valuable element for anybody, right? If you have to wait for it to break and then call us, to me, that technology... That's certainly, big for us. I think the other one, and this is tricky, and we don't do any of it, but I've talked to a couple companies that use, technology besides FaceTime in the home to help a technician through a call. Because as quickly as we can build the technicians, that full technical element that they have to still learn takes them time and experience. And it's just something you can't bottle. They have to see it, touch it, understand it. So To me, it's the predictive element, and then 2 is some sort of video link, or whether it's the eyeglass cams or some kind of cam that tell you, hey, here's what you're working on, and it's a clear picture. We don't have it, but I've talked to a couple companies that use it. They actually record everything in their call and store it on their software so they can go back and look. To me, if there's a legality that I didn't ask them about, but somewhere, that to me is where I can see things starting to go. So you'll have one service manager sitting with a bank of 6 or 8 cameras, and he's helping guys in different homes. Now that's down the road, but we're starting to see that. So those are the 2 things I see from technology.
Okay.
Well, I'm with you. Just here's what everyone needs to hear. Tech-enabled companies. Stephen Gurley right here taught me this a few years ago. Tech-enabled companies drive more value. And here we are now in the stage of our industry where value creation is, where the top companies, what they're thinking about every single day. How do I make this company more valuable for its stakeholders? And so tech-enabled companies drive more value 3 to 5 to 10 more times multiple turns than non-tech-enabled companies. So, we had been working on this for ever since I purchased Goettl in 2013. Where can I install tech-enabled systems to help increase our efficiency and our customer journey, things like that? So we have, currently we run a product what we call Digital Duncan, where the technicians are armed with their iPad and there's 7 sensors. They're hooking up to the system. We have help desk back in Phoenix, and all of my locations call into Phoenix and get coached on the repairs, get coached on what to talk to the customer about. They talk to the customer sometimes. Every one of our installations is commissioned through the system, and we get their baseline and we make sure it's installed to factory specifications, running to factory specs before we leave. So we installed that years ago, and it works great, and it helps us put out lower skilled technicians in the field faster. Now we're really digging into the whole predictive maintenance and really trying to tear apart the old Oligard club membership model, because as the challenge with it, as you continue to grow your club base and you still have a motive to go out and get in the demand business, the club base sometimes can become a distraction, or you're not able to get to them and really honor your promises to your customers. So now we have been working with Smart AC and using smart maintenance, whereby we install their device in their home, and now we're monitoring the system, and we'll go do the maintenance when the data tells us we should do the maintenance, especially on lower opportunity jobs, brand new equipment, for instance. Add to the next level of that, you take a Smart AC device and you put it on every single new install you do. We'll do 20,000+ installs this year. Every single year, we're adding 20,000 monitored customers to our business, which then, again, another big value creator. So that's the kind of things we're working on now.
Yeah, that conversation was interesting. It is. I do love seeing how different technologies are advancing the industry, and obviously, like anytime you can involve tech in it, get a bigger multiple. Well done. But that whole conversation has been pretty interesting. So shout out to Smart AC. I see you, man. So listen, guys, we're like 55 minutes into this thing, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut it down because I need a water.
Well, and let me say this as it relates to service champions, both branches, Northern California, and I know they weren't owned by the same people, but they kind of shared some best practices, ran beautiful businesses, and I compare myself to them a lot. I can do it faster. They just are so much better, more precision ran businesses that I've ever built. I admire how they built them. But I've been in the world of buying underperforming assets, fixing them, growing them fast, and selling them. That's the world that's the game I'm playing. But the way that they built those 2 branches is, I would say, probably some of the best ran businesses in the industry. Well done.
Is he flirting with you?
Oh, look,
I'm attribute more to Leland.
Certainly to what Leland's done. I think, Appreciate it. It's good though that you have, a lot of great peers in the industry right now. And I think our job, kind of to Ken's point, our job is to continue to drive to change the industry from what it's known, which is really just, not fast to change. And we talk about technology, and our job is to continue to be, better providers of service, better employers. So we appreciate it. And I think, look, Ken's been on all these panels, him, Leland, Dave, you name all those same guys. And my job is to continue to, see if we can improve on that. And, Service Champions is well known. We're, the one thing for us is we're changing the platform like the other ones. It won't be known as Service Champions. It'll be the Champions Group, because Service Champions is the branch in Southern California.
Right.
And, it's a great brand, but we have some really great brands. And to Leland's credit, built a great business. But thanks, Ken. It's good to hear. But there's a lot of people doing this really well. How do we all do more of it, get smarter, and, continue to push, how this industry can perform and change people's lives?
Well, you guys.
By the way, let me just make sure we give Kevin Comerford his due as well. Beautiful ran business, first class.
Yep, I've had him. He was on one of the episodes earlier, or middle of last year. Great guy, super sharp. Competed against him up there.
Yeah, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed in both Service Champions businesses, as far as I can see.
Yep.
Got it. Well, listen, I appreciate, my relationship with both you guys, and thanks for taking the time to do this. I'm sure Frank flew in just for this, so I really appreciate that. Ken, thanks for the ride here, man. But these are obviously, for all the listeners, like these two are clearly titans in the industry and have been through it all, and maybe different strategies or different things, but the end result is they're both growing monster businesses. So it's not one size fits all. You can try different things, different technology, different management styles, different selling techs versus comfort advisors. Doesn't matter. Like there's a way to scale all these things, and these guys are just giving you their opinions. So we've confirmed the next battle of the titans is going to be.
I'm buying Ken a drink for that suggestion. Actually, several.
Versus Victor. Now I have to actually ask them. So, but I bet you I can get it done. And that'll be a good one. So maybe you guys should just co-host that one with me. Let's just make it a little bit more interesting. But I appreciate you guys. Thanks for taking the time to be here, and our listeners, obviously, for tuning in, and thank you for working through this one with me, because this one was probably the most rough one I've ever done.
Thanks for having us on
today. But appreciate both of you guys too. I'm looking forward to our panel tomorrow. I know that here at ACCA, that they put us at the end because they saved the best for last. So that's why we're tomorrow, by the way. But anyway, I appreciate you guys, and then to our listeners, obviously, for listening over and over again, and obviously leave reviews. And we love to be able to share that with our guests. You don't have to do everything, but you got to do something. No 0 days.